Welcome to an hour of HealthMade Radio. HealthMade is a community for natural health seekers where we educate people about common health conditions and share extensive research on the most effective natural health treatments and promote legislation that protects our health freedoms. Our core concept belief is in the innate intelligence and healing power of the body, and if properly supported spiritually, emotionally, and nutritionally, it can find its way back to health. HealthMade Radio will bring information from integrative health experts throughout the world. Check us out at healthmade.co. Health is what you make it. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt, and I'll be your host. Today's guest is Magdalena Wszelaki. Magdalena Wszelaki is the founder of Hormones Balance Community and Welina Products, supplements made by women for women. Her online platform and products are dedicated to helping women to balance hormones naturally. Magdalena is an endocrine nutrition expert, certified herbalist, speaker, educator, and a published author with a long history of her own hormonal challenges. These challenges include Graves' disease and Hashimoto's disease, both autoimmune conditions causing thyroid issues, and estrogen dominance. Today, she is in full remission, and while sailing through perimenopause, she teaches women how to accomplish the same. Magdalena, thank you so much for being on the show today.
What a pleasure it is, Dr. Michael.
It's going to be fun. And this is such a crucial topic, talking about hormones, because this is something, I have patients coming in, females, and they have this whole hormonal orchestra, and they don't know what's going on. They have emotional ups and downs. They, certain things, their menstrual cycles are off. They feel anxious. They are tired. I mean, how does a person unravel all of that? I mean, how do you, being an expert, kind of look at all these things, and what are kind of your initial thoughts and steps to start to unravel something like this when a person comes into you?
Yeah, so, it can get pretty complicated really quickly, right? And especially if you want to look at it from the lens of, conventional medicine, and then you can start chasing every single symptom that's resulting from hormonal imbalances in women, right? But actually, at the end of the day, it doesn't have to be that complicated. And what I have found is that regardless whether the woman is in her reproductive years, in 25 to 35, and she's having horrible PMSs and fibrocystic breast, lumpy breast, infertility problems, or whether it's a woman 45 and above going through horrendous perimenopause or menopause, and now having hot flashes and sleeping problems and memory losses and horrendous mood swings, which can all be hormonally related, right? And fatigue issues. There is a few underpinning things that we can do as humans and in a natural way that can actually really help us. And I just want to emphasize this one more time, regardless of which, of what kind of hormonal condition you have. Sure, there's certain things we can do for specific conditions, but what I have found in my years of practice and having accumulated a number of different autoimmune diseases that cause hormonal problems, as well as having hormonal problems myself for years and years, is that there is three major bodily systems, if you will, that really underpin the health of our hormones. And that is the health of your gut, the health of your liver and its abilities of detoxifying us, and then your blood sugar balance. I call it a three-legged stool, and I use that profoundly throughout all my cookbooks and programs, and whenever I speak, is that when you think about it, I'm sitting actually in my closet recording this because that's the only quiet place I can find in the house, and I'm sitting on a three-legged stool, okay? Now, imagine if one of the legs in that stool was either missing or was shorter than the others, right? I would be wobbling, feeling very uncomfortable talking to you, and I could fall. So with our health and hormones specifically, I have found that, again, digestive health, liver optimization, and your blood sugar balance, which so many women are struggling with, especially as we get older, we start having metabolic problems, we start having, belly fat, right? That's very much of the function of insulin resistance, if you will. And so, in fixing those, I have found that a great amount of hormonal problems get resolved. And so a lot of times as women, we think of it as like, first of all, that having hormonal problems is inevitable. It's something that you can't change. It's something that is part of being a woman. For example, we assume that PMS is a very normal thing for women with productive years. And I want to assure you that feeling different throughout the cycle is obviously normal, but to be in pain and lying on the floor with a box of painkillers isn't normal, and it doesn't have to be this way. Hot flashes are not a given. Night sweats are not a given, right? And so, so it's something that we can really change. And our hormones don't fail as the primary system. The endocrine system typically suffers because of the gut health issues that we've had for years, compromised liver, detoxification abilities, right, and our blood sugar levels being all over the place.
Yeah, because a lot of times when we think of hormones, we think of like, estrogen, progesterone, and then testosterone, so those are kind of the words we're thinking of when we're thinking hormones. But in reality, they are such downstream hormones, meaning that there are a lot of things that takes place, prior to that needs to be in place and before, those hormones are corrected, so to say, just to, so like if you go to a OBGYN and you're a little low in progesterone, so then they just give you progesterone, versus then looking at what are all the things that take place prior to and correct that in order to be able to address the hormonal balance.
Absolutely. That is absolutely correct. And, and probably, when I talk about a three-legged stool analogy, I'm assessing the physiological side of things. But I also don't want to be, closing the eye and our audience's mindfulness about also the emotional side of things. It's not something that I work with, but I want to just be very mindful. For example, a woman going through years of stress can suddenly develop breast cancer or have all sorts of hormonal problems or develop an autoimmune disease. And stress and sleep, I think those are the two big components that are hugely contributing towards endocrine or hormonal dysregulation in a lot of women, especially as we age. So yes, nutrition can play a huge role, supplements, herbs on the physiological level, but addressing stress, whether it's current or past stress, like resolving past traumas, and having sufficient sleep. I think sleep is one of the most underestimated tools in our toolbox as women. Is something that, can be a huge contributor to, whatever hormonal imbalances, whether, like you said, whether it's estrogen dominance, whether it's our cortisol levels, whether it's thyroid function, et cetera.
Yeah, so, and I'm glad you mentioned sleep, because while you're sleeping, and people may not be fully aware of this, is that's when your pituitary is highly active. And that is like the director of the whole hormonal show. So if you don't take you have the appropriate sleep, or you don't have the appropriate sleep environment, then that can really then impact your whole hormonal cascade. So it's like, removing the director, in front of the orchestra, and then just the orchestra is just supposed to play on its own. And we know how all that goes, right? Yeah,
absolutely. And, there's so much also that's also going on in sleep, including our blood sugar balance, the sensitization of receptors for glucose and insulin is improved during sleep. I mean, the whole detoxification of your liver happens in sleep. You're resetting your entire metabolic system during sleep. I mean, there's so many. I don't even know whether we should be convincing our listeners how important sleep is. However, it can also be a catch-22, because a lot of women who start having problems sleeping after age 45 is typically correlated with dropping estrogen and progesterone levels, right? And so that's something also to be mindful of. It's like, is the sleep causing this hormone problems, or is it dropping hormones that are causing our sleeping problems, right? And so that's another definitely paradigm to address on how do we up those hormones or regulate them nutritionally and with supplements in order to get proper sleep.
Exactly. So, and that's the thing, you kind of described how important it is to not just hyper focus on the hormones themselves, but recognizing that they are an effect of all these other things that you need to address. I mean, looking at your blood sugar level, looking at your liver, looking at your gut. So how does a person then that is dealing with hormonal issues, I mean, how do they assess their status in these different areas?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, it can be really as simple as, so let's talk about, for example, gut health. That would also benefit immediately your liver function and blood sugar levels. Learning to eat in a way that is highly anti-inflammatory. So I'm a big fan of doing something called the elimination diet, which takes away foods that we know a lot of women and just generally people, but, my audience are women, so I'll just say women, benefit tremendously from reducing or actually eliminating completely for a period of 28 days things like gluten, soy, dairy, corn, eggs, maybe nightshade vegetables. So there will be things like potatoes, eggplants, peppers, tomatoes, for just 28 days. And learning to eat this way, one of the incredible things happens when you take out those, not reduce, but actually completely eliminate those potential trigger foods. You lower inflammation, your endocrine system is going to start functioning a lot better. Your gut starts repairing itself, but also the whole microbiome can reset itself to a large degree. And, many hormones are very dependent on the gut of the health. So whether it's the thyroid hormones, your T4, for those of you who are on Synthroid, for example, Synthroid gets converted in the gut to T3, which is the hormone that actually does all the work, or whether you have estrogen dominance, symptoms like terrible PMSs and fibrocystic breast and fibroids and endometriosis are some of the symptoms. Estrogen also gets metabolized in the gut itself, and the microbiome plays a huge role there. So just by doing the elimination diet can be really profound for a lot of women, and that's what my cookbooks are based on. But there's a lot of other books out there that avoid these trigger foods that I just mentioned. And not picking it, one the caveat I will say here, not picking and choosing what you want to eliminate, but really do it by the book. Because we tend to eliminate foods that are just convenient for us, but leaving in the dairy. Because it's like, hey, I can't give up my cheese. And most likely when you have a problem with a food, to eliminate a food, that's most likely actually the food that you are having the biggest addiction for. And that might be actually your biggest trigger food that's causing a lot of your symptoms. By doing the elimination diet, you're also offloading your body from so-called toxicity from that trigger food. And then, your liver automatically will benefit from that as well. I think the liver is highly underestimated organ, in terms of a lot of people do detoxes, but without realizing that, you can't do a detox once or twice a year and then eat rubbish for the rest of the year. It's like saying, I do a spring cleaning once a year of my house and then maybe one more time on Boxing Day, and that's it, right? And then you don't clean your house for the rest of the year. Just imagine what your house would feel like. And so with the body, it's the same thing. When you do the elimination diet, then you're supporting your liver throughout, and then continuing on eating and living in a way that you cut out those trigger foods. In my cookbooks, I explain how to do the elimination diet and how to reintroduce foods that your body will tell you by looking at the symptoms. What food is your friend and what food is your foe. Dr. Michael, I'm a staunch believer that actually gluten in the form that's available to us today, and the damage that we've done to ourselves unconsciously to our digestive system. I generally am a proponent of all women being on gluten-free diets who have hormonal problems. Dairy, most of it as well, except maybe for a couple of things, like once in a while, if you can tolerate things like feta cheese or some form of sheep cheese, etc., that could be a good option. But other foods like eggs, for example, it's something that you need to eliminate for a month and then reintroduce, and your body will tell you whether it's struggling with it or not. Let me give you an example of somebody I worked with many years ago. She was one of the CXOs, like one of the very top people in one of the very large IT companies that all of us probably use on a daily basis. And she came to a crisis in her life where her peers were reviewing her very negatively for her mood swings and basically calling her the worst to ever work for. And her husband then served her papers to get a divorce, and they were newly married. And so she realized this was not gonna be. She just can't continue living like that. Problem was that she was also vegan, so there was an additional complexity. But then she started eating eggs as an addition to protein, And so we did the elimination diet, and when she reintroduced the eggs into her diet, this is where the horrendous mood swings came back, which, a lot of mood swings can be also connected to hormones and neurotransmitter health. And so this is a good example of, of something seemingly healthy, like an egg, which you might call a complete protein. And if it's coming from, from a great farm just down the road from you, and you know that those chickens are eating grass and all the good stuff, that's not the point. The point is that you're, even from amazing eggs like that, hens like that, those eggs might not be your best friend. So eliminating those really can help tremendously both your liver and your gut healing. When it comes to blood sugar levels, doesn't have to be super complicated, but I will say two things that are really great starting points for anyone who can start doing this. Number one, it's start eating savory foods for breakfast. I cannot emphasize this enough. I've lived in over 7 different countries. I've traveled to over 40. And the more you go to what's sadly called as developing countries, right? Whether I travel to Peru and go into the morning markets and see and I love, I'm an early bird, so I typically get up at 5 a.m. That's just my natural cycle, and I love going to local food markets. And you see that whether you go to Peru, if I travel to Japan or go to Morocco, it's always savory breakfast first thing in the morning. And there's a reason for that. Versus in America, we do eat desserts for breakfast. Even a lot of healthy, supposedly or seemingly healthy breakfasts, like, for example, a smoothie, can contain a lot of sugar right off the bat. And so I'm a big proponent of what I call PFF breakfast, a protein, fat, and fiber-rich kind of breakfast. If you don't have time to cook early in the morning, then having dinner leftovers, for example, might be a really good idea to do, or doing intermittent fasting if that agrees with you. That's something that is one really simple change. The second thing is when it comes to really understanding how much sugar is impacting your life is to do a bit of a detective and do an intake of how much sugar you find there is in foods that you consume on a daily basis. It can come as a real shocker to people when you actually add up the amount of sugar you're eating daily from whether it's the ketchup or whether it's even a healthy drink that you're drinking, whether it's even your kombucha or a fruit juice, a smoothie that you're consuming. All of that can add up to incredible amounts of sugar. And let me give you an example. For instance, one of the big retailers or coffee shop chains, right, sells a famous iced coffee drink that contains, and is specified on their website, 88 grams of sugar. Now, if grams don't really tell you very much, it's a real simple calculation. You take 4 grams of sugar, that's 1 teaspoon. So it's really simple. Then you know that 88 grams, you divide it by 4, it gives you 22 teaspoons of sugar. I mean, would you put 22 teaspoons of sugar in a glass of water and drink it out first thing in the morning? Probably not, right? So this, I generally don't like, I never advocate for micromanagement of like calculating your macros and calories and such, because it is obsessive and is not sustainable. But, this is the one time I always suggest, especially if you have kids, you can turn that into like a excursion to a supermarket with a bit of a detective angle to it. And it's like, let's see how much sugar there is in the foods that we always eat. And most people come back and they're shocked, including those women who really think they eat healthily. When they add up things, it typically comes up to 80 to 90 grams of sugar easily a day. And that's way too much. I advocate for 20 grams of sugar a day, which is equivalent to about 5 teaspoons, including sugar that's found in natural foods. So sorry, it's a long answer to your question, but I think it's like, combining the elimination diet with being very conscious of how much sugar we're consuming. It's a really great starting point for someone who is struggling with their hormones.
Yeah, and so these are these key principles. But let's take a quick break and let's get back, kind of follow up on that, because that's such a important aspect that people need to understand. You're listening to Health Made Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I am here with author of Cooking for Hormone Balance, Overcoming Estrogen Dominance, two different books, the newest book being Overcoming Estrogen Dominance. Magdalena Wszelaki. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Health Made Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Magdalena Wszelaki. She is the founder of Hormones Balance Community and Velena Products, supplements made by women for women. So, Magdalena, what's really important for people to understand, I think, and we're talking about the gut, we're talking about things that are causing inflammation in the gut, and one of the things that is interesting to know is that you have something that's called phase 3 detoxification. So when the liver detoxifies, 3 different phases, several different phases. So, but the third phase is that if there's inflammation in the gut or it's a toxic gut, we're talking about the microbiome, the bugs that, are good and bad that exist within the gut. So if there's inflammation there, that will actually tell the liver to not detoxify, which means that will then throw off your hormonal system. So that's why, the liver and the gut is so crucial. And then the blood sugar, obviously, if that goes up and down, then you impact the adrenals, and then that also triggers inflammatory responses. So, these things are such fundamental keys in order to be able to balance your hormones rather than just kind of throwing a hormone at a already inflamed and toxic and stressed environment.
Yes, that is very true. And, I get often asked, like, are you against a woman taking hormones or even bioidentical hormones? And the answer is no, I am not. And occasionally I do progesterone too. The only caveat to this is that, clearly if a woman is really struggling with her health and she needs to go on bioidentical hormones for a while to get her sanity back, to be able to sleep again and function again and be cognizant again, I surely advocate for that, right? And get her bone health back in order. That's definitely, there is a time and place for that. However, too many even functional doctors and obviously allopathic, conventional, traditional doctors are throwing hormones at women as the only remedy and not addressing the inflammatory responses like you talked about. And the result of that is that if we don't address our gut issues, our liver issues, our blood sugar balance, right, then what happened is that these hormones these external hormones that you are introducing, even if in a bioidentical form, oftentimes only have limited results. Or sometimes they work for a while and then they stop working. A lot of other symptoms are coming up. And for some women, they just don't work at all. So it's really a really wonderful and smart approach to, if you need to get on bioidentical hormones right away, do so in order to get your life back in order. But have it's like a short-term plan, right? But then you also have your long-term plan when you go like, you know what, I really want to clean up my diet because it's going to help me with my weight. And I mean, Dr. Michael, you've seen this before yourself, and I just want to state the incredible benefits the women experience when they go on the elimination diet. It's like suddenly, we hear from our audience on a regular basis, my period is so much better, my period is not so heavy anymore, my hot flashes have significantly reduced or completely gone, I'm sleeping so much better, my energy is way better, my brain fog has lifted. And this person, brain fog is a good example of someone who's got thyroid issues, right? And so, and what would happen is you go and see your endocrinologist and you say, like, my brain fog is just still there, it's getting worse. And what do? They just up your thyroid mats, right? And sometimes it may help, but a lot of times it doesn't. But then this woman will do an elimination diet, and suddenly it's like, wow, my brain fog has lifted, and I can think again, and like I'm really good at my job again, and like I don't have to write everything down because I actually remember things. So the benefits are so profound, But I will say it's more work, for sure, than just getting on a hormone. But I have a feeling like your listeners here are on a longer ride.
Yeah, exactly.
So if that is you, it's not just your hormones are going to benefit, but it's also your entire life. I mean, reducing cancer risk, sleeping better, looking better, your skin is going to look better, your eyes are going to be so much whiter, and I mean, people are going to start walking up to you and say, what have you been doing? Because you look amazing. Yeah.
exactly. And especially now you're mentioning cancer. I mean, breast cancer is obviously one of the leading killers for for women. I mean, it's something that is just dramatically increasing, and it's important then to be aware of when you are talking about balancing the hormones and taking the appropriate step. Not just kind of doing things cosmetically, where we're throwing hormones at to try to solve the solution, but also looking underneath the hood, to see what do we need to fix, how do we need to fix this engine so that it actually works appropriately. So by kind of digging deep and looking at the underlying root causes and addressing them, you are then putting yourself at a much better place to avoid things like, the scary C word, cancer. And that is something that's really important nowadays, because it's becoming more and more people that's coming into my practice dealing with that. So that's why it's so important.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. And if you ask me what is my biggest fear in life, it's probably getting breast cancer, and it's not coming from a place of paranoia or some imaginary fear. It's a true, substantiated fear, or I should say concern, because of my family history. So, since we're talking about breast cancer, I mean, most breast cancers in the United States are the result of estrogen dominance, and so it's only a very small percentage of women who have like the BRCA1, BRCA2, like the way Angelina Jolie had, or or triple negative breast cancers. Those are just really, 85% of cancers are due to estrogen receptor positive breast cancers, right? And so, so it's part of the reason why I'm very fearful of it or conscious or mindful of it is the fact that I have both sides of my family members, women, dying of other estrogenic cancers. So not just breast cancer is an estrogenic cancer, but also uterine cancer, ovarian cancer, lung cancer in non-smokers, and our thyroid cancer can also be estrogenic, right? So although it's not very deadly. So, I have both sides of my family who have passed away from, most of my aunts, for example, have lost a uterus in their 30s and 40s. And there's like a joke in my family that there is no woman in our family who still has a uterus after age 50. And so I'm 49 today, and I'm really planning to hold on to my uterus for life, Dr. Michael.
Good.
And
that's a good goal, I think. When do you feel you achieved your goal? When I kept my uterus past 50. Oh.
So there is so there's a genetic component in my family for sure. We are I've had my genes tested, and I'm definitely a very slow estrogen metabolizer. So I tend to get very estrogenic very quickly. So that definitely puts me in a category of being a high risk. But having understood that, this work has become even more meaningful for me because it's personal, right? And then really empowering women to understand that it's not a given. It's not your destiny. That just because breast cancer runs in your family doesn't mean you're gonna get it. There's a lot of things you can do to prevent it from happening. And the things that I talked about are really fundamental. There's a lot of other things you can do to deal with estrogen dominance, and I've written a whole book about it. And by the way, estrogen dominance is not just cancers that it manifests as, but it's a lot of times women who develop breast cancer have had estrogen dominance a big part of their lives, and that will manifest in the form of symptoms such as a young woman, you would have had very difficult periods, heavy periods, painful periods, right, or scanty periods. Women who had a lot of infertility problems always had a lot of lumpy breast, fibrocystic breast history. Women who have grown fibroids, endometriosis. On a physical side of things, like if you are the woman who tends to store a lot of fat around your hips and thighs, that tends to be estrogen dominance. That estrogen is the one that kind of deposits the fat there. So thyroid nodules, interestingly, so many women have thyroid nodules, and they've, without realizing that could also be due to estrogen dominance. So those are, some of the very basic and a long list of symptoms. And so breast cancer doesn't just happen, right? Like no cancer just happens. It's years of stuff that we do that results in that. However, there's so many things that we can do to prevent it from happening, right? And, we talk a lot about nutrition here, but it's also a big component of when it comes to estrogen dominance, but it's also, I think, is just for any common sense person is to eliminate, any form of synthetic estrogens in your lives, right? So your skincare products, your cleaning products, stuff that you inhale, the so-called nice smelling, and people say nice smelling, products. I find it pretty disgusting, especially for someone who I haven't used really anything synthetic in my house for the past 20 years. I actually find them pretty offensive. But if you talk about like the mainstream, cleaning products, house cleaning products, mainstream skincare products are being advertised on television, radio, glossy magazines, mainstream advertising. Be assured that those are only brands that use highly synthetic products can afford to advertise in these sort of media. So, but again, it's an easy solution because there is such a plethora of incredible brands that make really clean skincare and clean products, or learn even how to really deploy simple things like vinegar and baking soda and some essential oils to make your own cleaners at home. I use a lot of those. And can I just share with you what my cleaning crew just told me like a couple of months ago?
Yes, let's do that. I'd love that. Actually, let's take a quick break, and then we'll get back to that. Listening to Health Made Radio, Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Magdalena Wszelaki. She's the author of Cooking for Hormone Balance and also her newest book, Overcoming Estrogen Dominance. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Health Made Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Magdalena Wszelaki. She is the founder of Hormones Balance Community and Welina products, supplements made by women for women. So, here you have, you don't use any kind of chemical cleaners because all of them, they have these they call it xenoestrogens that are then, drive this estrogen process that can put you more at risk for, estrogen causing cancers, so forth. So what did your cleaning crew say? I'm really curious.
So I have this lovely couple who comes and helps me clean the house, every other week. And so when they first came and I told them about what my requests were, they were a little bit surprised, and they're like, "Are you sure this thing is going to work?" And so I've been working with them for over a year, and so they basically played along. And 2 months ago, it's a couple, and so the lady came back and she said, "You know what? I fired 3 of my clients who refused to do natural cleaning products because I've realized how much switching products to this way of cleaning has actually saved my life. All her allergies, skin issues, eye problems, her thyroid, she had a very swollen thyroid, which one of the first things I told her, I said, I hope you don't mind, but your thyroid is enlarged. And her thyroid problems have gone away. She said her menopause, the hot flashes have stopped happening, and all she changed was just this cleaning products. But mind you, of course, this is a cleaning crew, so they do cleaning for a living. They are exposed to a lot of chemicals every day, and so it was a wonderful story to hear that just by changing the product, so many of her symptoms have gone away. And I'm really proud of her to have fired 3 customers who refused to change.
Yeah, exactly. And I see that in my practice. I mean, I have, the women, you have hairdressers that come in here, dealing with hormonal issues and neurological issues. And then people that do cleaning. I mean, they are exposed to these chemicals day in and day out, and they deal with hormonal. So for females, and obviously, the female hormonal, but then also put them at risk for cancer. And then, men, dealing with a lot of prostate issues, because of being exposed to these chemicals. So, I mean, that's huge. I mean, these chemicals, I mean, to do an inventory, you talked about doing an inventory about all the sugars you're eating, but doing inventory is also all the different chemicals you're exposed to day in and day out. I mean, that's huge.
That is huge. And, one of my suggestions is, in case somebody's listening to this and go and still is very far from any of the things that we're talking about, it all sounds a little demanding and feels big. My strong suggestion is to create a plan for yourself for the next 1 year, and and just make a promise to yourself that every month you're going to change something new in your life, and do it by stages. Because if you try to implement everything, it can be really quite overwhelming. I certainly, and I'm sure you did too, we didn't change everything in 1 month, and probably not even in 1 year. For me, it has been definitely a progress of making changes and realizing more and more of how various things, including not just toxins and skincare or cleaning products and what I'm eating, but also how stress and my own thought process, or sleeping patterns, or can really make an impact on my hormones as well. So just give yourself permission to make it a prolonged process, and and space it out, and give yourself months or a year even to make those changes. The good news is that it's an incredible amount of resources that is available now. I still remember when I was first diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis in 2008. There was basically there was nothing about how to what to do to help yourself. Now, when you just Google Hashimoto's, or you Google estrogen dominance, is the other side of the spectrum, which is so many resources, you don't know where to get started. So, but I would rather, exactly. I don't know about you, Dr. Michael, but I would rather go with too many resources and pick one and stick to that lane and implement what this resource is teaching, versus having no resources at all.
I fully agree. Let's take a quick break. Listening to Health Made Radio, listening to Magdalena. I'm interviewing Magdalena Wszelaki. She is the founder of Hormones Balance Community and Welena product. She also founded Thyroid Diet Coach, and also she has a segment of Cooking for Balance lectures that she offers 8-day viewing for free, where you can learn a huge amount of things in regards to how to cook to support your hormonal system. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Health Made Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Magdalena Wszelaki. She is the author of 2 amazing books that is just a plethora of information when you're dealing with hormonal issues on how to cook and how to overcome these hormonal issues. Her HarperCollins book is called Cooking for Hormone Balance, and her newest book, which I know she is extremely proud of, and the amazing information is life-changing in there. It's called Overcoming Estrogen Dominance. So if you would kind of sum up, I mean, we talked about the importance of regulating blood sugar, working on the liver, also, supporting the gut, cleaning out, all the xenoestrogens or estrogen-like type of chemicals that we're exposed to in cleaning products and hair products and soaps and shampoo, all these different things. But how about the kind of the nutritional aspect? Are there certain nutritional changes or supplements or things that you think that this is key for an individual that wants to work on their hormonal system?
Yeah, that's an important question, right? And so, because we talked about a lot of things about to be removed, and then the question is, so I think it's, you nailed it. Like, what else? What can we do to add? Because that's equally important. Surrounding yourself with green leafy vegetables that are in the cruciferous family, so the broccoli family, and so those will be, things like kale and collard greens and arugula and and your cauliflower, right? Broccoli sprouts are all incredible vegetables that really have a lot of sort of nutritional power, but also will help with detoxification pathways in the liver. My other favorite is definitely adding a lot of bitter foods, and so bitter flavor is one of the lost flavors in our culture. And so things like parsley, cilantro, if anybody knows of herbs such as burdock root and dandelion root, are just, finding those in herbal stores and making that tea, especially after a meal, that gets all your gastrointestinal juices, gastric juices going, is just really wonderful additions. I'm also a big fan of using flaxseed, a couple of tablespoons of freshly ground, and I want to stress the word freshly ground flaxseed might be a really great idea. Flaxseed is full of estrogen, but phytoestrogens, so naturally occurring estrogens. It's not going to make estrogen dominance worse. It's just going to introduce very soft, very subtle, low levels of estrogens that are very beneficial for women. And also incredible source of fiber that will help your bowel movement. Anybody who's constipated, you are recycling all these utilized, metabolized, harmful hormones back into your body if you're not pooping. And so, we poop hormones out, literally. So I would say, so those cruciferous vegetables, and throw away, really throw away the spinach, throw away the lettuce. Nutritionally, they're very poor. They don't really support all the functions that I talked about just now. And, and lettuce especially, it's you also have to add a lot of different, a lot of sugar to it or salt in order to make it tasty, So substitute that with the vegetables that I talked about. In terms of supplements, I definitely have a few on my recommendation list. The very basic one I would say is magnesium. I'm a big fan of magnesium. For anyone who is struggling with things like poor sleep, you're craving chocolate, you've got constant, tension in your shoulders, and your muscle tweaking, and you're having body pains and aches. Magnesium is really wonderful. And you've got constipation problems. Magnesium is really a wonderful thing to add on, at least like starting off with 350 or more milligrams a day, and then go up until you get a loose bowel, and then reduce the dose. So those are just really important with magnesium. A lot of people say, oh, yeah, there is magnesium in my supplement. But, it's most of the time in a supplement will be like 50 milligrams. It's not nearly enough. And also just to be mindful of the type of magnesium. If a lot of people take magnesium oxide, which is a cheap, inexpensive, and very ineffective, in fact, it can be harmful form of magnesium for some people. So finding the right type. My favorite will be magnesium in a glycinate form or malate form. Those are the two that I highly recommend. If you have constipation, then consider doing magnesium citrate. B vitamins I'm a big fan of B vitamins. They will support your liver function, but also, unless somebody's eating organ meats on a regular basis, most of us are actually very depleted in B vitamins, and especially vitamin B1, B12, and B6 play a huge role in our hormone metabolism and conversion, if you will. So let's see what else. Vitamin C, you can't really go wrong with that one. Vitamin C in a whole food form, I'm a bigger fan rather than the absorbic acid form, just because it comes from a full form. It's a full spectrum, and it can be super helpful with progesterone production in women. Another thing, if you look at your nails, if you have white spots on the nails, it could be a zinc deficiency. And so zinc is also not only important for an immune system, but is also very helpful in progesterone production, something that a lot of women, the minute you hit 45, your progesterone is going to start dropping really quickly. So having the vitamin C, zinc, and vitamin E on hand can really help your own body produce progesterone in a good capacity. So I would say those are the probably the mainstream ones. I would just add on maybe probiotic, a broad spectrum probiotic added to your protocol, just to support that microbiome and how hormones are converted and metabolized in the gut. That might be helpful too.
That's amazing. It's such a great list of tools that people can implement to make sure that they maximize their hormonal health. So how can people get in touch with you? I mean, you have your two books that are amazing. I mean, I've looked through them, and it's just filled with practical information. What are some of the resources that you have available for people that are looking for solutions and are struggling, and where can they find those resources?
Yeah, so, if you like Facebook, we are on Facebook. We have a large online community, and it's and just look for hormones with an S, hormonesbalance.com. My website is also hormonesbalance.com, hormones again with an S, hormonesbalance.com. And if you join our mailing list, and on a weekly basis, we send out a lot of tips and recipes and latest research and some practical ideas on how to improve your hormones. And then we also on Instagram with Hormone Balance. That's another resource. And I would just mention that both my books are a combination of health books, so that explain the concept we talked about today a little bit more in depth, but they also cookbooks. So you get a whole bunch of recipes and meal plans so that, you can get started tomorrow without being overwhelmed.
Oh, thank you so much, Magdalena. This was amazing. And this is something that so many people are struggling with. And a lot of them come into my practice and they're just at their wits' end. So for them to be able to have a resource like this is tremendous. So thank you so much, Magdalena. I really appreciate this.
Thank you so much for having me.
That is it for today. Thank you so much for listening to Health Made Radio. Remember, check us out at healthmade.co. Health is what you make it. 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 Health